The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a dust-covered rider who'd traveled 3 days from Cheyenne. Silas Boone stood in the doorway of his weathered ranch house, squinting against the harsh Wyoming sun as he took the envelope. His calloused fingers, scarred from years of rope burns and gunfights, trembled slightly as he recognized the handwriting. "From Jeremiah," he muttered, more to himself than to the rider who was already mounting his horse to leave. Silas waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded before breaking the seal. The parchment crackled in the dry air as he unfolded it, revealing his old friend's careful script. "Silas, I heard about your mother's passing. Martha was a fine woman, and I know her loss weighs heavy on you. A man shouldn't be alone in that big house, especially not after all you've been through. I've taken the liberty of arranging something. There's a young woman, Clara May Henderson, who needs a new start. She's 23, educated, and knows her way around a household. More importantly, she needs a safe place, and you need someone to help manage things. She'll arrive on the 15th if you're willing. If not, send word immediately. Your friend, Jeremiah Wall." Silas read the letter twice more before folding it carefully and tucking it into his shirt pocket. A mail-order bride. The very thought made him uncomfortable. At 35, he'd long since given up on the idea of companionship. The Comanche Wars had taken something from him, left him hollowed out in places that couldn't be filled. The years as a bounty hunter afterward hadn't helped. Too much blood on his hands. Too many ghosts following him across the prairie. But Jeremiah was right about one thing. The ranch was too much for one man, especially with his mother gone. The vegetable garden had already begun to wither, and he could barely keep up with the cooking and cleaning alongside the demands of the cattle. The 15th. That gave him 5 days to prepare, or to send word to stop her coming. He stood there in the doorway for a long moment, watching the wind bend the prairie grass, before turning back into the empty house. Clara May Henderson pressed her face against the stagecoach window, watching the landscape transform from the relative civilization of Cheyenne to the raw, untamed expanse of the Wyoming Territory. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale skin made paler by the black traveling dress, blue eyes that had seen too much, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that did nothing to hide her youth. The other passengers had long since stopped trying to engage her in conversation. She'd perfected the art of being overlooked, of making herself small and quiet. It was safer that way. "Willow Creek Station," the driver called out, and Clara's stomach clenched. This was it, the end of the line, the beginning of... What? She didn't know this Silas Boone, had only Jeremiah Walsh's assurances that he was a decent man who'd seen hard times. But she'd trusted a man's word before, and that trust had nearly destroyed her. Still, she had no choice. The money was gone, the opportunities exhausted. This arranged marriage was her last chance at something resembling a life. The coach lurched to a stop in front of a modest building that served as inn, general store, and post office all in one. Clara gathered her carpet bag, everything she owned in the world, and allowed the driver to help her down. Her legs shook, though whether from the long journey or fear, she couldn't say, "You, Clara May Henderson?" The voice was low, rough as sandpaper. She turned to see a man standing beside a weathered wagon, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. When he lifted the head to look at her properly, she had to stifle a gasp. Silas Boone was not what she'd expected, tall and lean, with the kind of strength that came from hard labor rather than idle exercise. His face was weathered but not old, marked by lines that spoke of squinting into distant horizons. Dark hair, longer than was fashionable, curled slightly at his collar. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as storm clouds, holding a wariness that matched her own. "I am," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling he was seeing straight through her careful composure. Then he stepped forward, not too close, and reached for her bag. "I'm Silas. Ranch is about an hour's ride." He paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. You need anything from the store before we go? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. He nodded and loaded her bag into the wagon bed with a gentleness that surprised her. When he offered his hand to help her up to the bench seat, she hesitated only a moment before taking it. His palm was rough, warm, and he released her the instant she was settled. The ride began in silence. Clara kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, her back rigid despite the wagon's jolting over the rutted trail. Beside her, Silas handled the reins with an easy competence, his presence both reassuring and terrifying. She stole glances at him from beneath her lashes, trying to gauge what manner of man she'd bound herself to. Jeremiah didn't say much, he said finally, his voice cutting through the creak of wheels and harness. Just that you needed a fresh start. Yes. The word came out too sharp, too quick. She softened her tone. I mean, yes, that's right. He nodded, asking nothing more. The silence stretched between them again, but it felt different now, less strained, more contemplative. The landscape rolled past in waves of brown and gold. She'd never seen such emptiness, such vast space with nothing to fill it but wind and sky. It made her feel small, insignificant, but also strangely free. There were no walls out here, no locks on doors, no footsteps in the hallway at night. That's the ranch, Silas said, pointing ahead. Clara followed his gesture to see a cluster of buildings rising from the prairie like ships on a sea of grass. The main house was simple but solid, built of logs with a stone chimney that spoke of permanence. A barn stood nearby, along with various outbuildings and corrals. It wasn't grand, but it looked safe, sturdy. As they drew closer, she could see the signs of recent neglect. A garden plot overrun with weeds, laundry that should have been taken in days ago, a broken shutter hanging at an angle. The touch of a woman's hand had been absent here. And recently, my mother passed 2 months ago, Silas said, as if reading her thoughts. I've done my best, but, he shrugged, a gesture that said more than words could. I'm sorry for your loss, Clara said, meaning it. She knew what it was to lose the only person who cared whether you lived or died. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and set the brake. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Silas climbed down and came around to her side, this time when he offered his hand. She took it without hesitation. I'll show you inside, he said. You can have my mother's room. It's the largest. I'll take the back room. That's not necessary. It is. His tone brooked no argument, but it wasn't harsh. You'll want your privacy while you settle in. She followed him into the house, her eyes taking in everything at once. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace at one end and a cook stove at the other. The furniture was simple but well made, covered now in a fine layer of dust. Through one doorway, she could see what must be the main bedroom. Another led to what looked like a smaller room in back. Washrooms out back, Silas said, setting her bag inside the larger bedroom. There's a well with good water, root cellars stocked, though I'm afraid my cooking's nothing to speak of. I can cook, Clara said quickly, and clean, and tend the garden. I know how to preserve food, mend clothes, tend sick animals. Easy, he interrupted, and she realized she'd been talking too fast, too desperately. I'm not looking for a servant. Miss Henderson, just... He paused, seeming to search for words. Just someone to share the load. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. She'd been prepared for demands, expectations, the quick establishment of ownership. This careful consideration was somehow more frightening than aggression would have been. I'll leave you to get settled, he continued. Supper's usually at sundown. I'll be in the barn if you need anything. He turned to go, then paused in the doorway. Jeremiah's a good man. He wouldn't have sent you here if he didn't think, well, just wanted you to know that. Then he was gone, his bootfalls fading across the porch. Clara stood alone in the bedroom that still held the faint scent of lavender and age. Slowly, carefully, she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself one moment, just one, to shake. Evening came quickly on the prairie. Clara had spent the afternoon exploring the house, familiarizing herself with where things were kept, taking mental inventory of what needed doing. The list was long, but not insurmountable. She'd started by heating water and washing the dishes that had accumulated, finding a strange comfort in the simple, familiar task. Now she stood at the stove, stirring a pot of beans she'd found soaking. Silas must have started them that morning. She'd added salt pork from the larder, wild onions from the garden, and herbs she'd discovered dried and hanging in the pantry. The smell filled the kitchen, homey and warming. She heard his boots on the porch and tensed, but forced herself to keep stirring. The door opened, bringing with it the smell of horses and leather and honest sweat. "Something smells good," he said, and she could hear the surprise in his voice. "Just beans," she said, not turning around. "There's cornbread in the oven." She heard him move to the wash basin, the splash of water, the rough toweling dry. When she finally turned, he was standing uncertainly by the table, hat in hand. "Sit," she said. "It's ready." They ate in near silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the pop of wood in the fireplace. Clara picked at her food, her stomach too knotted to accept much, across from her. Silas ate steadily but slowly, as if he, too, was navigating uncertain territory. "This is fine cooking," he said finally. "Been a while since there was a proper meal at this table." "Thank you." She rose to clear the dishes, needing movement, needing something to do with her hands. "I can help." "No." The word came out too sharp. She softened it. "I mean, I'll manage. You must be tired from your work." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll be mending tack on the porch if you need anything." When he was gone, Clara allowed herself to breathe. She washed the dishes slowly, meticulously, drawing out the task. Through the window, she could see him on the porch, working by the light of a lantern. His hands moved surely over the leather, and she found herself watching the steady rhythm of his work. This was her life now. This house, this man, this vast emptiness all around. She'd traded one prison for another, perhaps, but at least this one had sky above it and wind that sang of freedom. When full dark came, she lit candles and made her way to the bedroom. Her few belongings looked pitifully small in the space. She undressed quickly, pulling on her nightgown with hands that shook only slightly. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The house was quiet, except for the settling of wood and the distant sound of Silas moving about. After what seemed like hours, she heard him come inside, heard his footsteps pause outside her door before continuing to the back room. Only then did she allow herself to lie down, pulling the quilts up to her chin. She lay awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd done. Outside, a coyote howled, the sound lonely and wild. Somewhere in the darkness, a door opened. Footsteps crossed the floor, paused, then continued outside. Through the window, she saw a shadow moving toward the barn. He was giving her space, she realized, sleeping with the horses rather than under the same roof, at least for tonight. The consideration made her throat tight with unshed tears. She rose and went to the window, watching the barn where a faint light now glowed through the cracks. The wind picked up, rattling the loose shutter, carrying with it the endless whisper of the grass. In the distance, the mountains stood like black sentinels against a star-filled sky. Clara pressed her palm against the cold glass and made herself a promise. She would earn her place here. She would work hard, be useful, be invisible if necessary. She would give this man no reason to regret his kindness. She would survive. She'd gotten very good at surviving. The light in the barn finally went out. Clara returned to bed, pulling the quilts around her like armor. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for tonight, she was safe. The door had no lock, but somehow that made her feel freer than she'd felt in years, as sleep finally claimed her. She thought she heard the distant sound of a harmonica playing a mournful tune, but it might have been only the wind. The days fell into a rhythm as predictable as the sunrise. Clara rose before dawn to start the fire and prepare breakfast. Silas would already be out with the horses, checking fences or tending cattle. They'd eat together in careful silence, then separate for the day's work. She kept house, tended the garden, preserved what she could from the dying vegetables. He worked the ranch, coming in only for the noon meal before disappearing again until supper. It had been 2 weeks now, and they'd developed an elaborate dance of avoidance. If she was in the kitchen, he'd find reason to be on the porch. If he came in unexpectedly, she'd suddenly remember something that needed doing in another room. They spoke only of necessities, the need for flour from town, a fence that required mending, a calf that had taken sick. Clara found herself studying him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way he moved with economy and purpose, never a wasted gesture, the gentle way he handled the horses, speaking to them in low tones she couldn't quite catch, the times she'd caught him standing at the edge of the property, staring at something only he could see on the horizon. This morning was different. She could feel it in the air, see it in the way Silas lingered over his coffee instead of heading straight out. "I need to go to town," he said finally. "Supplies. Thought you might. That is, if you need anything particular." "I could make a list," Clara offered. "Or you could come along." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. He cleared his throat. "Been cooped up here a while. Might do you good to see the town, meet some folks." Clara's hands stilled on the dish she was drying. The thought of town, of people, of questions and stares and whispered speculation made her stomach clench. But she looked at Silas, saw something in his face that might have been hope, and found herself nodding. "I'll get my bonnet." The ride to Willow Creek took them past several other homesteads. Silas pointed them out. The Garrett place, the Hendricks Ranch, the Widow Morrison's small farm. Each came with a brief history, told in his spare way. Good people, mostly, hard workers, the kind who minded their own business. As they neared town, Clara became aware of her appearance. Her dress was clean, but faded, clearly made over from something else. Her hands were already roughening from work. What would these people think of Silas Boone's mail-order bride? "They'll talk," Silas said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Always do when there's something new to talk about, but it'll pass." The main street of Willow Creek wasn't much, a collection of wooden buildings that looked as if a strong wind might blow them away. But there was a bustle to it, a sense of life and purpose. Wagons crowded the street. Men called greetings to each other. Women in calico dresses moved between shops with baskets on their arms. Silas pulled up in front of the general store and helped her down. She was acutely aware of the sudden hush that fell over nearby conversations, of eyes turning their way. "Mrs. Boone!" A woman's voice cut through the tension. Clara turned to see a middle-aged woman in a flour-dusted apron emerging from what must be the bakery. "Land sakes! Silas, you didn't tell us you'd gotten married." "Mrs. Patterson," Silas said, touching his hat brim. "This is Clara." "Clara, what a lovely name." "Mrs." Patterson beamed at her with genuine warmth. "You must come by for tea sometime. I'm sure you have stories to tell about wherever you've come from. It's not often we get new faces in Willow Creek." Before Clara could respond, others were approaching. She found herself surrounded by curious faces, peppered with questions. Where was she from? How did she meet Silas? What did she think of Wyoming? She answered as best she could, keeping her responses vague but polite. Missouri. Through a mutual friend. Wyoming was certainly spacious. Beside her, Silas stood like a protective wall, his presence oddly comforting. Now, give the poor girl room to breathe." A man's voice boomed. The crowd parted to reveal a large man with a sheriff's star on his vest. "Tom Morrison," he said, tipping his hat. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Mrs. Boone." Clara noticed how his eyes lingered on Silas, something unspoken passing between the men. Old history there, though whether good or bad she couldn't tell. "We should get those supplies," Silas said. Inside the general store, Clara tried to focus on the task at hand while Silas spoke with the proprietor about grain prices. She was examining a bolt of blue calico when she heard voices drift from the next aisle. "Surprised he found anyone willing," a woman was saying. "After what happened with the Comanche, and then those years hunting men for money." "Hush. Edith, the war changed a lot of men." "Changed, maybe, but the blood doesn't wash off so easy. That poor girl probably has no idea what she's gotten herself into." Clara's hands tightened on the fabric. She forced herself to move away, to examine the selection of threads with intense concentration. But the words echoed in her mind. "Blood doesn't wash off so easy." "Find something you like," she startled. Silas stood behind her, a sack of flour balanced on his shoulder. "Just looking," she managed. He studied her face, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. His jaw tightened, but he said only, "Get what you need. We've credit here." The ride home was quieter than the journey out. Clara clutched the small packet of thread and buttons she'd selected, her mind churning. She'd known Silas had a past. What man didn't? But hearing it spoken of so baldly, the casual mention of killing. "You're wondering," he said as they left the town behind. About what they said, Clara said nothing, unsure how to respond. "It's true, most of it. Scouted for the army during the wars. Did things I'm not proud of. After that," he shrugged, "man's got to eat. Bounty hunting paid well, and I was good at it." "Why did you stop?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, woke up one morning and couldn't remember the face of the last man I'd brought in, dead or alive. Didn't matter to me anymore. Figured that meant it was time to come home. They rode in silence after that, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the careful avoidance of the past weeks, but something heavier, weighted with truth. That night after supper, instead of retreating to the porch, Silas remained at the table. Clara moved about her evening tasks, aware of his presence, of the way he seemed to be working up to something. "My mother used to say a house needs laughter to make it a home," he said finally. "Been a long time since there was laughter here." Clara paused in her sweeping. Was she happy here? Happy enough. She loved my father fierce. Followed him out here from Ohio when everyone said she was crazy to do it. After he died, she stayed for me. Said the land was in our blood now. Couldn't leave even if she wanted to. How did he die? Cattle stampede. I was 12. He rubbed his face, looking older in the lamplight. She never remarried. Said one great love was enough for any lifetime. Clara resumed sweeping, unsure how to respond to this unexpected openness. They'd shared a house for 2 weeks, but were still strangers. Now, in the space of one day, walls were coming down, and she wasn't sure she was ready. The next morning dawned gray and humid, promising storms. Clara woke with a heaviness in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, only to find Silas already there. Coffee made. "Storm coming," he said. "Need to move the cattle to higher ground. Might take most of the day." She nodded, relieved at the prospect of solitude. But as she watched him prepare to leave, checking his rifle, filling a canteen, she felt an unexpected flutter of concern. "Be careful." He paused at the door, looking back at her with surprise. "Always am." The morning passed quietly. Clara threw herself into housework, trying to outrun her churning thoughts. She scrubbed floors that were already clean, reorganized cupboards that didn't need it, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. By noon, the sky had darkened to the color of fresh bruises. Wind whipped through the grass, and she could taste rain on the air. She just stepped into the garden to secure what she could when the first wave of dizziness hit. Not now, she thought desperately, but her body had its own timeline. The world tilted, her vision graying at the edges. She dropped to her knees among the bean poles, fighting to stay conscious, but the darkness was rising fast. Her last coherent thought was that at least Silas wasn't here to see this. She came to slowly, aware first of the rain on her face, then of the strong arms lifting her. Panic shot through her like lightning. She thrashed weakly, a sound escaping her that was part sob, part scream. "Easy, easy." Silas's voice, rough with concern. "It's me. You're safe." But safety was an illusion, and his hands on her body, even through layers of sodden fabric, sent her somewhere else. Somewhere with locked doors and footsteps in the night and hands that took what they wanted. "No!" she gasped, still struggling. "Please, no!" He set her down immediately, stepping back, hands raised. "Clara, look at me. You fainted in the garden. I'm just trying to get you inside." The rain was coming harder now, plastering her hair to her face. She blinked up at him, slowly returning to the present. To Wyoming. To a man who'd stepped back the moment she'd shown fear. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Nothing to be sorry for. Can you walk?" She tried to stand and swayed, without asking. He scooped her up again, but differently this time, careful to touch her as little as possible, his face set in grim lines. He carried her to the house and set her gently in a chair by the fire. "I'll get you some water," he said, but she caught his sleeve. "How did you— I thought you were with the cattle. Saw the storm coming in faster than expected. Figured I'd better check on things here." He pulled free gently. "Let me get that water." Clara sat shivering while he moved about the kitchen. When he returned with a cup, she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. The sight of it, this strong, capable man trembling, broke something inside her. "I'm sick," she said baldly. "Have been for years. The fainting spells come and go. Sometimes I have warning, sometimes not." He absorbed this silently, then asked, "What does the doctor say?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Doctors cost money, and the man I was married to before, he didn't believe in wasting coin on female complaints." Silas's face darkened. "You were married before." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "He died 8 months ago." His heart gave out. She couldn't keep the relief from her voice. "That why you needed a fresh start?" "Part of it." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I have nothing, Mr. Boone. No family, no money, no home. When Mr. Walsh wrote about you, about this opportunity, it seemed like salvation. And instead, you got a broken-down ranch and a man with blood on his hands. We all have our ghosts," she said quietly. They sat in silence while the storm raged outside. Finally, Silas stood. "You should rest. I'll see to the animals. The cattle. Made it to high ground before the worst hit. They'll keep—" He paused at the door. "Clara, next time you feel a spell coming on, tell me. I can't help if I don't know." After he left, she made her way to the bedroom on unsteady legs. As she changed out of her wet clothes, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror. Pale, thin, shadows under her eyes. No wonder he'd been concerned. But he'd let her go the moment she'd asked, had stepped back, given her space. Her late husband would have seen her weakness as an opportunity. That night, the storm continued its assault on the house. Clara lay awake listening to the wind howl, thinking about the man who was, once again, sleeping in the barn to give her peace. She thought about blood on hands and ghosts that followed you home. Maybe that's what they were. 2 damaged souls trying to find something like redemption in this harsh land. Maybe that was enough. The thunder rolled across the prairie like the voice of God, and Clara closed her eyes, praying without words for something she couldn't name. The blizzard came 3 days before Christmas, sweeping down from the mountains like an avalanche of white fury. Clara had seen snow in Missouri, but nothing like this. A solid wall of white that erased the world beyond the windows. Wind that screamed like a living thing. Silas had worked frantically to prepare, bringing in extra wood, securing the animals, nailing boards over the more vulnerable windows. Now they were trapped. The little house, an island in a sea of killing cold. Could last 3 days, could last a week, he said, adding another log to the fire. We've supplies enough, and the animals are sheltered. Just have to wait it out. Clara nodded, trying not to show her rising panic. The house suddenly felt very small, the walls too close. For weeks now, they'd maintained their careful distance, their choreographed avoidance. Now there was nowhere to retreat. The first day passed quietly enough. Clara mended clothes while Silas repaired tack. each absorbed in their tasks. They took turns checking the barn through the rope he'd strung between buildings, a lifeline in the blinding snow. The second day brought restlessness. Silas paced like a caged wolf, checking and rechecking windows, while Clara reorganized already tidy cupboards. By the third night, the silence had become unbearable. They sat by the fire after supper, the wind howling its endless song outside. Clara was darning socks when she noticed Silas pull something from his pocket, a small silver flask. "Whiskey," he said, catching her look. "Medicinal purposes." He took a sip, then surprised her by offering it across the space between them. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted it. The liquor burned, but it also warmed, loosening something in her chest. My first husband, he drank," she said, handing it back. "But not like this, not quiet and careful. He drank mean." Silas capped the flask, set it aside. "How old were you when you married him?" 16. The word tasted bitter. "My father owed him money. Couldn't pay. I was the settlement." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the storm raged on. "He was 47, she continued, surprising herself with the need to speak it. "Edgar Thornton. Owned a dry goods store, had a fine house on the best street. Everyone said I was lucky." "Were you?" "No. Simple, final. He liked to collect beautiful things. Painted plates from France, crystal birds. A wife young enough to be his daughter. And he was very particular about how his possessions were displayed." She could feel Silas watching her, but she kept her eyes on her darning. "The first time I displeased him, I'd burned his supper. I was still learning to cook on his fancy stove. He was very calm about it. Said he understood. Accidents happened. Then he took me to the bedroom and explained, very carefully, why wives must be more careful." Her hands had stilled on the fabric. "He didn't use his fists. Said that was for common men, and he was not common. He had other methods, quieter methods, the kind that didn't leave marks anyone could see." "Clara." Silas's voice was rough. "I learned," she went on, needing to finish now that she'd started. "Learned to cook perfectly, clean perfectly, smile perfectly, to be the perfect possession. For 7 years, I was perfect, and then he died, and I discovered perfect wasn't enough. He'd left debts, the house, the store. All of it went to creditors. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a reputation as a widow who couldn't keep her husband's business affairs in order." She finally looked up to find Silas had moved closer, though still maintaining careful distance. His face in the firelight was hard to read. "Is that why you're afraid? When I carried you in from the storm, he came to my room every night." The words emerged barely above a whisper. "Every night for 7 years, I learned to go somewhere else in my mind. But the body remembers. When you touched me, just for that moment, I was back there." Silas stood abruptly, and for a moment she thought he would leave. Storm or no storm. Instead, he grabbed the poker and stabbed at the fire with unnecessary force. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't!" He turned back to her, and she was shocked to see rage in his eyes. Not at her, she realized, but for her. "Don't apologize for surviving." He returned to his chair, but the careful distance was gone now, replaced by something else. "You want to know about the blood on my hands? I'll tell you, I've killed men, dozens. Started when I was 19, riding with the army, Apache raid on a settlement. Found a family, man, woman, 3 children. What had been done to them?" He stopped, jaw working. "We tracked the raiding party for 2 days, caught them at a waterhole. The officer wanted prisoners, information, but I looked at those men and saw that family, so I started shooting. Didn't stop until they were all dead. The officer wanted to court-martial me, but the other scouts backed my story about self-defense." Clara found herself leaning forward, drawn by the pain in his voice. "That was the first time. Got easier after that. Too easy. By the time I left the army, killing was just something I was good at, so I kept doing it. Only now for money. Murderers, thieves, men who hurt. He caught himself. Men who hurt people weaker than themselves. Told myself I was doing right. But truth is, I'd developed a taste for it. What changed? Tracked a man to a cabin up in Colorado. Bill Morrison. Wanted for killing a shopkeeper. Found him all right, along with his wife and baby. She couldn't have been more than 17. That girl begged me not to take him. Said he was all they had. He rubbed his face. I took him anyway. Brought him in alive. Collected my bounty. Week later, heard the girl had died. Just gave up. They said, stopped eating, stopped caring for the baby. The wind gusted, making the walls creak. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. That's when I came home. Silas continued. Figured I'd done enough damage. Ma was getting frail. The ranch needed work. Thought maybe if I worked the land hard enough, stayed away from people, the blood might finally wash off. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Clara did something that surprised them both. She reached across the space between them and touched his hand. Just briefly. Just a brush of fingers. But he went absolutely still. We're a pair, aren't we? She said softly. The broken wife and the blood-stained husband. That what we are? His voice was strange. Husband and wife. On paper. And in truth? She withdrew her hand. I don't know. I don't know what truth looks like anymore. Silas stood, movements careful and deliberate. It's late. You should rest. But something had shifted between them with their confessions. Some invisible wall had crumbled. Clara found herself standing too, facing him across the small space. Silas? She had to force his name past suddenly dry lips. I get so cold at night. The bedroom. It's far from the fire. And with the storm. She couldn't finish, couldn't voice what she was asking, but he understood. She saw it in the way his breath caught, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Clara, I don't think... I'm not asking for that, just warmth, company, to not be alone while the world tears itself apart outside. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. She led the way to the bedroom, heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. This was madness. This was dangerous. But the need for human connection, for something real and warm in all this cold emptiness, overwhelmed caution. She climbed into bed fully clothed, moving to the far side. After a moment, the mattress dipped as Silas joined her, also fully dressed. Careful to maintain distance even in the confined space. They lay rigid as boards, neither moving, barely breathing. The storm howled its fury, and the house groaned in response. Then, gradually, the warmth between them began to build. Clara found herself relaxing, her body remembering what it was like to not be alone in the dark. Clara? His voice was barely audible over the wind. That man, your husband, did you ever feel anything besides fear? She thought about lying, then decided they'd moved past that. No, never. I used to wonder if something was wrong with me, if I was broken inside. Other women spoke of duty, but also of pleasure. I felt nothing but dread. Nothing was wrong with you. His voice was fierce. You hear me? Nothing. Tears burned her eyes. In the darkness, she felt him shift, felt his hand find hers across the space between them. Just that, just the simple clasping of hands. But it anchored her. Tell me something good, she whispered. Something from before all the blood and ghosts. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I had a dog when I was a boy. Ugly little mutt. Showed up half-starved one winter. Ma said we couldn't afford another mouth, but Pa let me keep him. Called him Badger on account of his temperament. She could hear the smile in his voice. That dog followed me everywhere, slept on my bed, despite Ma's rules. When I was 12 and Pa died, Badger was the only one I could cry with. What happened to him? Lived to be old and gray, died peaceful in his sleep summer before I joined the army, buried him under the big oak out back, still miss that ornery mutt. Clara squeezed his hand. That's a good memory. Your turn. Something good. She searched through years of darkness, finally finding a glimmer. My mother taught me to read. It was our secret. Father didn't approve of educated women, but she'd been a teacher before marriage. Couldn't bear the thought of raising an ignorant daughter. We'd steal moments when he was gone, huddled over her few precious books. She died when I was 12, but she gave me that. The ability to escape into words when the world got too hard. What was her name? Grace. Her name was Grace. They talked through the night, trading stories like precious coins. Small moments of light against all the darkness. His first horse, her favorite hiding spot as a child. The time he'd seen an eagle carry off a full-grown rabbit. The poem she'd memorized that still brought comfort, somewhere in the pre-dawn hours. Exhaustion overtook them. Clara woke to gray light filtering through frost-covered windows and the strange, muffled silence that meant the storm had passed. She was warm, wonderfully warm, and it took her a moment to realize why. In sleep, they'd moved together. Silas's arm was around her waist, her back pressed against his chest. She could feel his breath on her neck, steady and deep. For a moment, she lay frozen, waiting for the panic to come. It didn't. Instead, she felt something else entirely. Safe, protected, held without being trapped. It was so foreign, so unexpected, that tears slipped down her cheeks. Silas stirred, and she felt the moment he came fully awake, felt him register their position. He started to pull away, but she caught his hand, held it in place. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, just a little longer." He relaxed incrementally, his arm settling more firmly around her. All right. They lay like that as the world outside began to lighten. Two damaged souls finding unexpected shelter in each other. The storm had passed, but something new had taken root in its wake. Not love, not yet. They were both too wary, too wounded for that. But possibility, hope. And for now, that was enough. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, fighting winter for every inch of ground. The snow retreated to the mountains, leaving behind mud and the first brave shoots of green. Clara watched the transformation from the kitchen window as she kneaded bread, her hands working the dough with practiced ease. 3 months had passed since the blizzard, since that night of confessions and careful comfort. They'd returned to separate rooms the next day, but something fundamental had shifted. The careful dance of avoidance had become something else, a gradual drawing together, like two wild creatures learning to trust. Silas still slept in the barn some nights, but now it was by choice rather than necessity. Sometimes Clara would find him there in the early morning, talking softly to the horses, and he'd look up at her with something approaching warmth in those storm-gray eyes. "Bread's rising," she called out the door. "Coffee's ready." He appeared from the direction of the corral, sweat already beading despite the cool morning air. "That yearling's coming along. Might make a good saddle horse with proper training." They sat at the table, sharing the comfortable silence that had replaced their earlier wariness. Clara poured coffee, noting the way Silas's fingers brushed hers as he accepted the cup, a touch that would have sent her into panic months ago but now only caused a flutter of something unnameable. "Thought I'd ride out to check the eastern pasture today," he said. "Storm last month might have taken down some fence. I could come with you." The words surprised her as much as him. "I mean, if you have a gentle horse, I haven't ridden in years, but—" "You ride?" "A little. My mother taught me. Before." She shrugged. "Edgar didn't approve. Said it wasn't seemly for a merchant's wife to go galloping about." Silas's jaw tightened the way it always did when her late husband was mentioned. "I've got a mare that'd suit. Gentle as a lamb." An hour later, Clara found herself mounted on a brown mare named Molly, trying to remember lessons from a lifetime ago. Her body protested the unfamiliar position, but as they moved away from the ranch at an easy walk, muscle memory began to return. "That's it," Silas encouraged, watching her with an approving eye. "Let her do the work. Just move with her." They rode through grassland coming alive with spring growth, past scattered cattle grown fat on new grass. The sky stretched endless above them, a blue so pure it hurt to look at. Clara felt something unknot in her chest, a tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Wait until you see the wildflowers come June, whole meadows of Indian paintbrush and lupine. Ma used to say it looked like God spilled his paint box." They found the damaged fence where a dead tree had fallen across it, while Silas worked to clear it. Clara walked along the fence line, gathering early spring greens she recognized: dandelion, lamb's quarters, wild onion. "Planning a feast?" he asked, watching her fill her apron pockets. "These are good eating if you know how to prepare them. My mother called it poor folks' salad, but I always liked the taste. Never had much use for green things," he admitted, hefting the broken fence post. "Ma tried to get me to eat proper, but after she passed, I could teach you," Clara offered. "About the plants. I mean, what's good to eat? What has medicinal uses?" He paused in his work to look at her, and she saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "I'd like that." They worked together to repair the fence, Clara holding posts while Silas hammered. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth and releasing the scent of sage and new grass, when they finally stopped to rest. Sharing water from his canteen, Clara noticed the way his shirt clung to his back, outlining the muscles beneath. "Hot for spring," he said, and without ceremony pulled the shirt over his head to wipe his face. Clara's breath caught. She'd known about the scars, had felt them through fabric that night in December, but seeing them in daylight was different. Long, pale lines crossed his chest and back, some old and faded, others newer, the story of violence written on skin. She must have made a sound because he looked up sharply, then down at himself. His hand moved as if to reach for the shirt, then stopped. "Ugly sight, I know." "No." She moved without thinking, closing the distance between them. "Not ugly. They're proof you survived." Her hand lifted, hovered near a particularly vicious scar that ran from shoulder to ribs. "May I?" He nodded, unable to speak. Her fingers traced the line of damaged flesh, gentle as butterfly wings. He shuddered. Whether from her touch or memory, she couldn't tell. "Apache?" she asked softly. "Comanche. Caught me separated from my unit." His voice was rough. "Thought they'd killed me, left me for dead. Took me 3 days to crawl back to camp." Her hand moved to another scar, this one round and puckered. "Bullet? Bounty hunting. Man didn't want to come quiet." Each scar had a story, each mark a moment when death had reached for him and missed. Clara found herself mapping them all, this geography of survival. When she looked up, she found him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, vulnerable and hungry all at once. "Clara!" Her name was barely a whisper. She should step back, should return to safe distance. Instead, she placed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her hand. "I see you," she said. "All of you, and I'm not afraid." He caught her hand, pressed it harder against his chest. You should run far and fast from a man like me." "Where would I go?" She meant it to sound light, but it came out raw with truth. "You're my home now. Silas Boone, you're my safe place." He made a sound like he'd been punched, then pulled her against him. Not roughly, not with demand, but with desperate care. She felt the heat of his skin, smelled sweat and leather and something uniquely him. Her body, which had known only fear and revulsion from men's touch, relaxed into his embrace. "Is this all right?" he asked against her hair. Yes. And it was more than all right. For the first time in her life, she wanted to be closer. They stood like that in the spring sunshine, holding each other like shipwreck survivors. Then Molly whinnied, breaking the spell, and they stepped apart. "We should head back," Silas said, but he was smiling, a real smile that transformed his face. The ride home was quiet but charged with new awareness. Clara found herself stealing glances at him, noticing things she'd been too fearful to see before. The way his hands held the reins, firm but gentle, the line of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse like he'd been born to it. That evening, as Clara prepared supper from the greens she'd gathered and the last of the winter stores, she felt him watching her. She turned to find him in the doorway, shirt properly buttoned, but that new warmth still in his eyes. "Smells good. It's nothing fancy, just Clara." He stepped into the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded, hands stilling on the dishes. "That night in December, during the storm, when you asked me to stay, were you—" He stopped, started again. "I need to know if that was just about being cold and scared, or if it wasn't just about the cold." She admitted, I wanted to feel safe, and you made me feel safe. And now?" She turned to face him fully. "Now I want more than safe." The words hung between them like a challenge. Silas crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, then stopped just out of reach. "I need you to be sure," he said. "I'm not him. I'll never be him. But I'm still a man with rough hands and too much blood in my past. I need to know you see me clear." "I see you." She closed the distance between them, placed her hands on his chest. "I see a man who sleeps in barns to make a stranger feel safe, who carries wounded creatures 5 miles to help, who speaks gentle to horses and harsh to no one. I see you, Silas." This time, when he kissed her, she was ready. His lips were careful on hers, questioning, and she answered with her whole body. Yes, 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 when they broke apart, both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not good with words," he said. "Never have been, but you should know. You're teaching me things I didn't know I could learn." "Such as?" "Such as maybe the blood does wash off, given time and reason. Such as maybe a broken thing can heal straight if it's tended proper." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. "We're tending each other." "That we are." They ate supper closer than usual, their knees touching under the table. When night fell and Clara rose to head to her room, Silas caught her hand. "Stay." The word came out rough. "Not for... I sleep better when you're near." She squeezed his hand. "So do I." They lay in his narrow bed, still fully clothed but wrapped around each other. Outside, coyotes called to the rising moon, and the wind sang through the grass. Inside, 2 wounded souls continued the slow work of healing, one careful touch at a time. "Silas?" Clara whispered into the darkness. That place in my mind I used to go, to escape. I don't go there anymore." His arms tightened around her. "Where do you go instead?" "Here, I stay right here with you." She felt him smile against her hair. "Good, that's good." Sleep came easier than it had in years, wrapped in safety and the promise of something that might, someday, bloom into love. The house that had sheltered loneliness now held hope. Fragile as spring grass, but just as determined to grow. In the morning, there would be work and challenges and the slow building of a life together. But for now, in the quiet darkness, they held each other and dared to believe in second chances. The moon traced its path across the sky, and somewhere in the vast Wyoming night, an owl called, not in mourning, but in celebration of the hunt, of survival, of life going on despite all odds. The morning after their first night together as husband and wife, truly together, with all the tenderness and trembling that entailed, Clara woke alone. For a moment, panic clawed at her throat. Then she heard the sound of hammering from outside and relaxed back into the pillows that still held Silas's scent. She rose slowly, her body feeling different. Not hurt, never that. He'd been so careful, so patient, stopping whenever she tensed, waiting for her to lead. It had been nothing like her experiences before. Those had been about taking. This had been about giving, about sharing, about 2 people finding light in each other's darkness. She dressed carefully, her fingers lingering on the marks his gentle hands had left. Not bruises, but something else. Evidence of passion freely given and received. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman looking back. There was color in her cheeks, a brightness in her eyes she'd never seen before. In the kitchen, she found coffee already made and a wildflower, a early prairie rose, laid on the table where she usually sat. Such a simple gesture, but it made her throat tight with emotion. Through the window, She could see Silas working on the chicken coop, reinforcing it against predators. He'd shed his shirt again in the warming morning, and she watched the play of muscles under scarred skin with a proprietary feeling that surprised her. Mine, she thought, and the word didn't frighten her as it once might have. She was mixing biscuit dough when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses riding fast. Silas heard them too, straightening from his work, reaching casually for the rifle that was never far from hand these days. 3 riders appeared over the rise, and Clara's blood went cold. She knew that figure in the lead, would know it anywhere despite the months that had passed. Samuel Morrison, Edgar's cousin, the one who'd tried to claim her after Edgar died, who'd driven her to flee Missouri with nothing but desperate hope. "Stay inside," Silas said quietly, not looking away from the approaching riders, but Clara had spent too many years hiding. She stepped out onto the porch, chin raised, though her hands shook where she gripped her apron. Samuel pulled up just outside the yard, his pale eyes finding her immediately. He'd grown thinner, she noted, and there was a meanness in his face that had always been there but now showed plain. "Hello, Clara," he said, touching his hat brim in mockery of courtesy. "Been looking for you for quite some time. Mr. Morrison." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You've wasted a journey. I have nothing for you. Now, that's where you're wrong." He dismounted, his 2 companions remaining on their horses but watchful. "See, when Edgar died, he left some debts that fall to his widow to pay. I paid what I could, the house, the store, everything was sold." "Everything?" Samuel's smile was ugly. "Not quite everything. You see, Edgar owed me personal services rendered, you might say, and he promised payment in specific coin." Clara felt Silas move closer, not touching but near enough she could feel his heat. "State your business plain," Silas said, his voice dangerously quiet. Samuel's eyes flicked to him, dismissive. "You'd be the new husband. Boone, isn't it? The killer turned rancher?" He laughed. Clara always did have a taste for dangerous men, though I'll wager she didn't tell you the whole truth about her situation. "Whatever you think you're owed," Silas said. "You won't find it here. Won't I?" Samuel pulled a paper from his coat. "Bill of sale, signed by Edgar Thornton, dated 2 months before his death. Payment for services to be rendered in the form of, well, let's call it companionship." Clara's knees nearly buckled. "No, that's not. Edgar wouldn't." "Oh, but he did. You see, I helped him with some business matters. Delicate matters. The kind that could see a man hanged if they came to light. In exchange, he promised me you. Only then he up and died before making good. And you disappeared." "That paper's worthless," Silas said. "A man can't sell what he doesn't own, and he never owned her." "Didn't he? 7 years of marriage says otherwise. Besides, there's the matter of Edgar's other activities. The ones I helped cover up." Samuel's eyes glittered with malice. Amazing how young some of his customers were, how very young. And Clara here, keeping his books, managing his correspondence. Well, a case could be made for complicity. Clara made a sound of horror. She'd known Edgar had dark tastes. But this... "I didn't know. I never... Who's to say what you knew or didn't know?" Samuel shrugged. "But I'm a reasonable man. Come with me now. Honor your late husband's agreement, and all that unpleasantness stays buried. Like hell." Silas's rifle was in his hands now, not quite aimed, but ready. "Get off my land." "Your land." One of the other riders spoke for the first time. "Way we heard it. This spreads in the widow's name. Mrs. Thornton's name." "Mrs. Boone," Silas corrected. "Legal and proper. Registered at the county courthouse." Samuel's face darkened. "You think that changes anything? You think a piece of paper makes her less of what she is, what she's always been?" "Careful," Silas warned, but Samuel was past caring. A woman who spreads her legs for bed and board, who watched her husband destroy innocence and said nothing, who ran like the coward she is rather than face justice. The rifle was aimed now. Last warning. Clara found her voice. "It's all right, Silas." She stepped forward, shaking off his restraining hand. "Mr. Morrison wants the truth? Fine. The truth is Edgar was a monster. The truth is I survived him however I could. The truth is, when he died, I ran because men like you," she faced Samuel squarely, "think a woman is property to be passed around like livestock. You admit to knowing. I admit to being young and frightened and trapped. I admit to shutting my eyes to things I should have seen because seeing them would have killed me. But I never participated, never condoned. And I'll die before I let you or any man use my survival against me." Samuel's hand moved toward his gun. "That can be arranged." The shot was impossibly loud in the morning air. Samuel's gun spun from his hand as he cried out. Clutching his wrist, Silas worked the rifle's lever, the spent shell casing bright in the dust. "Next one goes center mass," he said conversationally. "Your choice." The two mounted men had their hands up, wanting no part of this. Samuel cradled his bleeding hand, face twisted with rage and pain. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll have the law on you. Assault, attempted murder." "Try it," Silas said. "Explain to the sheriff how you came onto my property, threatened my wife, and pulled a weapon. Explain about that paper and what services exactly you thought you were buying. I'm sure folks would love to hear all about Edgar Thornton's special interests." Samuel's face went pale beneath the dirt. "You wouldn't dare. I've done worse for less cause." Silas's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "I've hunted men across 3 territories, brought them in dead or alive, made no difference to me. You think I'd hesitate to protect what's mine?" "She's not worth it," Samuel spat. "Used goods. Tainted." The rifle cracked again. This time the bullet passed so close to Samuel's head he felt it part his hair. He fell to his knees in the dirt. "Get up," Silas ordered. "Get on your horse, right away. Don't come back. Don't send others. Don't even think her name again. Because I'll know, and I'll come find you. And we'll have a different kind of conversation, one that ends with you feeding the coyotes. Understood?" Samuel nodded frantically, scrambling for his horse. The 3 men rode off in a cloud of dust, Samuel clutching his wounded hand. Silas waited until they were out of sight before lowering the rifle. Only then did Clara see how his hands shook. She moved to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressed her face against his back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you." He turned in her arms, pulled her against him hard. Don't apologize for that bastard's sins. But what he said about Edgar, about what I might have known, I don't care." He pulled back to look at her, hands framing her face. "You hear me? I don't care what you knew or didn't know. You survived. That's all that matters. You could have killed him. Wanted to." His honesty was brutal. "When he called you, when he said," his jaw worked, "I wanted to paint the ground with him. Why didn't you?" "Because you were watching. Because I want to be better than that for you. Because the blood on my hands is enough without adding more for the sake of pride." Clara rose on her toes and kissed him, tasting desperation and relief and something fierce as prairie fire. When they broke apart, she was crying, "What if he comes back? What if he brings the law? Then we'll face it together." Silas wiped her tears with his thumbs. "But I don't think he will. Men like that are cowards at heart. They prey on the vulnerable, the isolated. But you're not alone anymore." "No," she agreed. "I'm not." They went inside together, Clara's legs unsteady with reaction. Silas made her sit while he brewed fresh coffee, lacing hers heavily with sugar from their precious store. "Will there be others?" he asked quietly. "From your past?" "I don't know. Maybe. Edgar had business associates, other cousins." She wrapped her hands around the hot cup. "I'm sorry. I've brought trouble to your door." "Our door," he corrected. "And we've both got our share of trouble. Mine's just usually better armed." Despite everything, she found herself almost smiling. Is that supposed to be comforting? Just true. He sat beside her, close enough their shoulders touched. "Clara, what Morrison said about Edgar, about young customers." "I suspected," she admitted, the words like ground glass in her throat. "The way he'd look at them, the private meetings. But I was a coward. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just my own damaged mind seeing evil where there was none. And even if I'd known for certain, what could I have done? Who would have believed Edgar Thornton's child bride over his word? You were surviving. Was I? Or was I complicit through my silence? Silas took her cup, set it aside, and gathered her hands in his. You want to carry guilt? Fine. Carry it for staying silent, for not being strong enough to fight back. Lord knows I carry enough guilt for the both of us. But don't you dare carry it for him. For his sins. For his evil. That's his burden to bear in whatever hell he's burning in. Clara looked at their joined hands. His so much larger, scarred from work and violence, yet holding hers like something precious. Do you really think he's burning? I hope so. I'm not much for church, but I hope there's a special place for men who hurt children, for men who cage women and call it marriage. Silas? She waited until he met her eyes. I need you to know. Last night, what we shared, it wasn't gratitude, wasn't payment for protection. It was, I know what it was. His voice went soft. Same thing it was for me, a claiming, a choosing, a beginning. Yes. The word came out on a sob. He pulled her onto his lap, held her while she cried, for the girl she'd been, for the years lost to fear, for the children she couldn't save, for the weight of survival that sometimes felt heavier than dying would have been. When her tears finally stopped, the sun was high and the day's work waited, but they sat a moment longer, holding each other in the quiet kitchen. We should check the horses, Silas said eventually. That shots might have spooked them. Clara nodded but didn't move. Silas, what you said to Morrison, about protecting what's yours. Too much. I know some women don't like. No. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. Not too much. I've never been anyone's before. Not really. Edgar owned me like he owned his crystal birds. But belonging with someone, to someone, by choice, that's different. Different how? She thought about it. Like the difference between a cage and a home. Both have walls, but one you're locked in and the other you can leave whenever you choose. Knowing I could leave makes me want to stay. He caught her hand, pressed it harder against his chest. Stay then. Stay with me. Clara Boone. I will, she promised. For as long as you'll have me. Forever, then. It was too soon for such words. Perhaps. They'd known each other mere months, been truly together only hours. But time moved differently on the frontier. Life came fast and hard, and sometimes short. You learned to grab happiness when it appeared, to speak truth when you felt it, to love fiercely because tomorrow was promised to no one. They rose together, faced the day together. There would be other challenges. Samuel Morrison might return, or send others. The ranch faced constant threats from weather and predators. Their own damaged souls still had healing to do. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. They had chosen each other. And that, Clara thought as she watched Silas check his rifle before heading out, was its own kind of miracle. The prairie wind sang its endless song, and somewhere a meadowlark added its voice to the chorus. Life went on, hard and beautiful and worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth claiming as her own. The journey to the county courthouse took 2 days. They'd left before dawn, the wagon loaded with supplies and Clara wearing her best dress, a simple blue calico that brought out her eyes. Silas had polished his boots and trimmed his hair, looking uncomfortable but determined in his Sunday clothes. Nervous? He asked as they rolled through the early morning mist. Yes, Clara admitted. But not about this, about what comes after. He glanced at her. Morrison? Him, others like him. The past has a way of reaching out when you least expect it. Then we'll cut its fingers off when it does. The matter-of-fact way he said it made her smile despite her fears. They stopped for the night at a way station, signing the register as Mr. and Mrs. Boone without hesitation. The proprietor's wife gave them a knowing smile when she showed them to their room. Newlyweds? She asked. In a way, Clara answered, and felt Silas's hand find hers, that night in the narrow bed. They loved each other with an urgency born of understanding how fragile happiness could be. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow deeper than any words they'd speak before the judge. The county seat of Laramie was the largest town Clara had seen since leaving Missouri. Buildings of brick and wood lined proper streets, and she counted 3 churches, a school, and more saloons than seemed strictly necessary. The courthouse stood solid and imposing, built of limestone that gleamed in the morning sun. Inside, their footsteps echoed on polished floors as they made their way to the registry office. "Help you folks." The clerk was a thin man with spectacles perched on a sharp nose. "Need to register a marriage," Silas said. "Legal and proper." The clerk's eyes sharpened with interest as he took in Clara's obvious quality despite her simple dress, and Silas's weather-worn presence. "Previous marriage?" he asked Clara directly. "Widowed," she answered, chin up. "My husband passed 8 months ago in Missouri." "Death certificate?" Clara's heart sank. No, I left quickly after his passing. I didn't think, can't register a new marriage without proof the previous one ended," the clerk said with obvious satisfaction. "Legal requirements." Silas leaned forward, and something in his posture made the clerk lean back. "The lady says she's widowed. That's good enough. Not for the law. It isn't." The clerk's voice had gone high. "I could lose my position if—" "What's the trouble here?" They turned to see a man in a judge's robes, gray-haired and distinguished, surveying the scene with sharp eyes. "Judge Patterson," the clerk stammered. "These folks want to register a marriage, but the lady can't prove her previous husband is deceased." The judge studied them both, his gaze lingering on the way Silas positioned himself protectively near Clara. "Come to my chambers," he said, "all of you." The judge's office smelled of leather and tobacco. He settled behind his desk, gesturing for them to sit. "Now then," he said, "tell me the real story. All of it." Clara looked at Silas, who nodded encouragement, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. She told it all. Edgar Thornton, the marriage that was a prison, the debts and threats after his death, her flight to Wyoming, even Samuel Morrison's recent visit. When she finished, the judge was quiet for a long moment. "Edgar Thornton," he said finally, "of Liberty, Missouri." Clara's breath caught. "You knew him? Knew of him? There were rumors, whispers, the kind of thing decent people didn't speak of openly, but everyone knew." His eyes were kind but sad. "I'm sorry for what you endured, Mrs. Boone," she said firmly. "Clara Boone." A slight smile crossed the judge's face. "Mrs. Boone. And you, sir, I believe I recognize you as well. Silas Boone, formerly of the Army, later a bounty hunter of some repute." "Yes, sir. I remember a case. Oh, 5 years back. You brought in the Watson gang, 3 brothers who'd been terrorizing settlers throughout the territory." "I remember. You brought them in alive when everyone expected corpses. When asked why, you said dead men couldn't face their victims' families." The judge leaned back. "That stayed with me. A man who understands justice is about more than killing." He opened a drawer, pulled out forms. "I'm going to register your marriage. As for proof of Mr. Thornton's death, I'll make inquiries through official channels. Until then, my word will suffice for any legal purposes." "Judge," the clerk protested, "the regulations clearly state—" "Mr. Henshaw," the judge cut him off. "In my 20 years on the bench, I've learned the difference between law and justice. The law says this woman needs a piece of paper. Justice says she's suffered enough for other men's sins." He began writing. "Besides, I received a letter last month from a colleague in Missouri. Edgar Thornton died of apoplexy on January 15th. I'll have the certificate sent for, but I see no reason to delay these good people's happiness for bureaucratic convenience." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "No need for thanks. Just live well together. That's payment enough." He signed the forms with a flourish. "There, legal and proper, as requested, Mr. Henshaw will file these immediately." The clerk looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, but nodded. As they rose to leave, the judge called after them. "Mr. Boone, a word of warning. Samuel Morrison has been making inquiries around town, seeking support for some claim or other. Most folks aren't interested in his kind of trouble, but he might find a few willing to listen for the right price. I appreciate the warning. And I appreciate a man who protects what's his without unnecessary bloodshed. We need more of that kind of law in this territory." He paused. "Though if Morrison pushes the matter, I trust you'll do what's necessary." "Count on it," Silas said quietly. Outside the courthouse, Clara stood blinking in the bright sunshine, the marriage certificate clutched in her hands. Real, legal, binding. No one could say she wasn't Clara Boone now, not without challenging the law itself. "Hotel," Silas suggested. "We could stay the night, leave fresh in the morning." "Could we?" Clara hesitated. "Could we go to a church first? I know we're already legal, but I'd like— that is, if you don't mind." Understanding softened his face. "Which one?" They chose the smallest church, a simple white building with a modest steeple. The pastor, a young man with kind eyes, agreed to perform a brief ceremony for a small donation. It wasn't fancy. No flowers, no music, no guests. Just Clara and Silas standing before the altar, speaking the old words that billions had spoken before them. To have and to hold, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. When the pastor said Silas could kiss his bride, he did so with such tenderness that Clara felt her knees weaken. This was what had been stolen from her the first time, the holiness of choosing, the sacredness of willing commitment. They found a respectable hotel near the courthouse, at dinner in the restaurant. Clara noticed how other diners looked at them, some with curiosity, some with judgment, a few with what might have been envy. She found she didn't care. Let them look, let them wonder. In their room that night, Silas produced a small wrapped package. "Wedding present," he said, almost shy. "It's not much, but I saw it and thought—" Inside was a thin gold band, simple but real. Clara's throat closed. "My mother's," he explained. "Had it in my saddlebags all this time. Couldn't bear to sell it even when times were lean. Would you—" "Yes," she breathed, holding out her hand. He slipped it on her finger, where it fit as if made for her. "There. Now everyone will know you're spoken for." "They already knew," she said, touching the ring in wonder. "You told Morrison I was yours, but this tells them I chose it." "Did you choose it?" she answered by pulling him down for a kiss that left no room for doubt. Later, as they lay entwined in the hotel's soft bed, Clara traced patterns on his chest. "We should head back at first light. The animals need tending." He agreed, already half asleep. "Silas, what the judge said about Morrison making inquiries." "I'll handle it." His arm tightened around her. "We'll handle it. Together." "Together," she echoed, and found she believed it. They left Laramie as the sun painted the eastern sky pink and gold. The marriage certificate was safely tucked in Clara's bag, but more important was the ring on her finger and the man beside her on the wagon seat. The journey home was marked by an ease that hadn't been there before. They talked of plans for the ranch, expanding the vegetable garden, maybe adding a milk cow, fixing up the old chicken coop. Simple dreams, but shared ones. As they crested the last rise before home, Silas suddenly pulled the wagon to a halt. "What is it?" Clara asked, alarmed. "Look." He pointed to the ranch below. At first, she saw nothing wrong. Then she noticed it. A thin column of smoke rising from behind the barn. "Stay here," Silas commanded, reaching for his rifle. "Like hell," Clara shot back, surprising them both. "Together, remember?" His mouth quirked despite the situation. "Woman, you'll be the death of me." "Not if I can help it." They approached cautiously, but as they drew closer, Clara could see the smoke wasn't from their buildings. Someone had made camp in the grove of cottonwoods by the stream. "Travelers, maybe," Silas said, but his grip on the rifle didn't loosen. As they pulled into the yard, A figure emerged from behind the barn. Clara's heart sank. Not Morrison, but one of the men who'd been with him, the one who'd commented about the land being in her name. "Mr. and Mrs. Boone," the man called out, showing empty hands. "No need for the artillery. I'm here peaceful-like." "State your business," Silas demanded. "Name's Jack Henley. I was with Morrison when he came calling, but I'm not with him now. Man's crazy as a rabid dog, and I want no part of what he's planning." "Which is?" Henley shifted uncomfortably. "He's gathered some men, promises of easy money, claims about hidden wealth, stories about you having strong boxes full of army gold from your bounty hunting days. Plans to come take it, and the woman too, if he can manage it." "When?" Silas's voice was deadly calm. "Soon. Maybe tomorrow night. Maybe the next. He's waiting on 2 more guns from Cheyenne." Henley met their eyes. "I signed on for intimidation, not murder, and that's what it'll be if he comes here. Figured you deserved warning." "Why?" Clara asked. "Why warn us?" "Because I saw how you looked at each other, how you stood together. My Ellen and I were like that once, before the fever took her." His voice roughened. "Morrison's the kind of man who destroys good things just because he can't stand to see them exist. I won't be part of that." Silas studied him for a long moment. "You looking for work?" Henley blinked in surprise. What?" "Ranch this size could use another hand, especially one who knows which side to stand on when trouble comes calling." "You'd trust me? After I rode with Morrison? You rode away from him when it mattered. That counts for something." Silas glanced at Clara, who nodded. "Bunk in the barn for now. We'll work out wages later. Right now, we need to prepare." As Henley headed for the barn with grateful thanks, Clara touched Silas's arm. "You sure about this? Man who warns of ambush is useful. Man who stands with you during one is invaluable. We'll know soon enough which he is." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Silas cleaned and loaded every weapon they owned. Clara filled containers with water, prepared bandages, cooked food that would keep. Together they moved anything valuable into the house, barricaded windows, created clear fields of fire. As darkness fell, they sat on the porch, watching the stars appear. The night was peaceful, but they both knew it was the calm before violence. "I'm not afraid," Clara said, and was surprised to find it was true. "No? No, whatever comes, we'll face it. Win or lose, live or die. At least we'll do it as ourselves, as who we chose to be." She looked at her wedding ring, gold catching the lamplight. "That's more than I ever thought I'd have." Silas pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her hair. "We'll win, we'll live, and Morrison will learn what happens when he threatens a boon." "2 boons," Clara corrected. "2 boons." He agreed, and his smile was fierce as a wolf's. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. Tomorrow or the next day, blood would water the Wyoming earth. But tonight, Clara Boone sat with her husband on their porch, wearing her mother-in-law's ring, legally wed and spiritually bound, and felt no fear at all. She was home. She was loved. She was ready. Let them come. Winter's grip had barely loosened when the fever took hold. Clara noticed Silas's flushed cheeks first, the way he pushed food around his plate at supper. When she placed a hand on his forehead, the heat radiating from his skin made her gasp. "It's nothing," he insisted, but his voice was already hoarse, just tired from mending fence all day. By midnight, he was burning. Clara had seen fever before, but nothing like this. Silas thrashing in delirium, calling out names she didn't recognize, reliving battles fought long ago. She bathed his face with cool cloths, forced water between his cracked lips, and tried not to panic when he didn't recognize her. "Don't leave me," she whispered, holding his hand as he fought invisible enemies. You promised we'd face everything together." Jack Henley proved his worth those terrible days. He took over the ranch work without being asked, brought in snow to cool Silas's fever, rode to town for what medical supplies could be found, but the doctor was visiting settlements to the north, wouldn't return for days. "He's strong," Jack told her on the 3rd night, finding her slumped beside the bed. "Seen him shot and still standing. He'll fight through this. But Clara saw the worry in his eyes. Silas had stopped thrashing, which might have been good, except he'd also stopped responding to her voice. He lay still as death. Only the slight rise and fall of his chest showing life remained. She crawled into bed beside him, pressed herself against his burning body. "Listen to me, Silas Boone," she said fiercely. "You don't get to die. Not now. Not when I finally know what it means to be happy. Not when I—" She choked on the words she'd never said aloud. "I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. And I will not let you go." Whether it was her words or sheer stubborn will, something shifted. His fever broke near dawn, sweat soaking the sheets. When his eyes opened, they were clear for the first time in days. "Clara." His voice was a rasp. "I'm here." She was crying. She realized, "I'm right here. Thought I heard— Did you say— I love you?" She said clearly. "I should have said it sooner. Should have said it every day." A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. "Love you too. Even if you are a terrible nurse, this broth tastes like dishwater." She laughed through her tears, kissed him senseless, then went to make better broth. His recovery was slow. The fever had taken weight he couldn't spare, left him weak as a newborn colt. Clara wouldn't let him rise for a week, threatening to tie him to the bed if necessary. She fed him rich broths, soft bread, anything to put strength back in his body. It was during this time, as she was carrying in fresh water, that she felt the first flutter, like butterfly wings against her insides. She set the bucket down carefully, hand going to her belly, again, stronger this time. "Oh," she breathed. She'd suspected for weeks the absence of her monthly courses, the queasiness in the mornings, the new tenderness in her breasts. But this was confirmation. Life grew inside her. New life, created in love rather than duty or force. She found Silas propped against pillows, attempting to mend harness despite her orders to rest. "You're impossible," she scolded, taking the leather from his hands. "Can't stand being useless," he grumbled. "Jack's doing my work and yours too. It's not right. Jack's earning his keep and glad to do it." She sat on the bed's edge, suddenly nervous. "Silas, I need to tell you something." His eyes sharpened with concern. "You feeling poorly? Did I give you the fever?" "No, nothing like that. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat belly. "We're going to have a baby." The silence stretched so long she began to worry. Then Silas made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and pulled her against him. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby. Are you happy?" She had to ask, had to know. "I know we never talked about children, and with Morrison still out there." "Happy?" He pulled back to look at her, and she saw tears on his cheeks. "Clara, I thought I'd used up all my chances at good things. Thought the best I could hope for was to not do more harm. But you, and now this." He placed his hand over hers on her belly. "I don't have words for what I feel." "Try," she urged softly. "It's like coming in from a blizzard to find a fire waiting. Like water after days in the desert. Like—" He stopped, frustrated. "I told you I'm no good with words." "Those were beautiful words." She kissed him gently, mindful of his weakness. "Though we should probably work on your poetry before the baby comes. Can't have you comparing our child to water in the desert." "Our child," he repeated, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "When?" "Late summer. I think maybe early fall. We'll need to add on to the house, a proper room for the baby, and fix up that old cradle in the barn. It was mine. Ma saved it." He was already planning, the enforced idleness forgotten. "Slow down," she laughed. "We have months yet." But she was planning too. The garden would need to be bigger. They'd need to lay in supplies before she got too large to travel. And somehow, they'd need to deal with Morrison before the baby came. The thought of bringing a child into the world with that threat hanging over them. "I see that look," Silas said. "What are you worrying about?" "Morrison. He's still out there, still planning God knows what. Not for long." The gentleness left Silas's face. replaced by the hardness she'd first known. "I've been thinking while I lay here useless. It's time to stop waiting for him to come to us." "Silas, you're not strong enough." "Not yet, but I will be. And when I am, I'm going hunting. One last time." A chill ran down Clara's spine. "You promised you were done with that life." "I am, but a man threatens my wife, plots against my home, plans to take what's mine." His gray eyes were storm dark. "That man needs to learn there are consequences. We could go to the law." "With what? Henley's word against Morrison's? Even if they believed us, Morrison would disappear. Wait, come back when we least expect it." He shook his head. "No, this ends on my terms." Clara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Morrison was like a rabid wolf. He wouldn't stop until he was stopped. "Not alone," she said finally. "Whatever you do, we do together." "Clara, no, you don't get to protect me by pushing me aside. We're partners, remember? For better or worse." He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Together, then, but not until I can sit a horse without falling off. Deal." That night, as Silas slept peacefully beside her, Clara lay awake planning. Morrison thought he was dealing with a weak woman and a weakened man. He was wrong on both counts. She placed a protective hand over her belly. This child would not be born into fear. Whatever it took, whatever she had to do, her baby would come into a world where Morrison was just a bad memory. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. 2 riders approached slowly, hands visible, clearly meaning no threat. Clara recognized Sheriff Morrison, no relation to Samuel, thank God, from town, along with Judge Patterson. "Mrs. Boone." The sheriff touched his hat. "Sorry to intrude. Is your husband about?" "He's recovering from fever," she said carefully. "But he can receive visitors." She led them inside where Silas was attempting to shave with unsteady hands. He set the razor aside, instantly alert despite his weakness. "Tom, Judge, what brings you out here?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Got some news you need to hear about Samuel Morrison." Clara's hand found Silas's shoulder. "What about him?" "Man's been busy. Hired himself a lawyer from back east. Some slick talker named Pemberton. They're filing papers, claiming your marriage ain't legal, that Clara here is still bound by some contract to Morrison." "That's ridiculous." Clara protested. "The judge himself registered our marriage." "I did." Judge Patterson confirmed. "And it will stand, but Pemberton's clever. He's not challenging the marriage directly. He's claiming prior obligation. Says he has documentation proving Edgar Thornton sold his wife's companionship to cover debts." "No court would uphold that," Silas said, but his voice was tight. "No decent court," the judge agreed. "But Pemberton's pushing for a hearing in Cheyenne, where he might find a more sympathetic ear. There are judges there who still think of women as chattel." "When?" Silas's question was sharp. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Papers have to be served first. Hearing scheduled." The sheriff looked apologetic. "I wanted to warn you, give you time to prepare." "Or time to run," Clara said bitterly. "You're not running." Silas's voice was firm. "Neither of us is running. We'll face this in court if we have to." "With what lawyer?" she asked. "We can't afford—" "I'll represent you." Judge Patterson interrupted. "I may be a judge here, but I'm still a member of the bar in good standing, and I don't take kindly to men trying to buy and sell women like cattle in my territory." Hope flickered in Clara's chest. "You do that?" "Young woman, I've spent my career trying to bring proper law to this frontier. That means protecting the innocent and standing against those who would abuse the system." His eyes were fierce behind his spectacles. "Besides, I'd like to see this Pemberton fellow try his eastern tricks in a western court." After the men left, promising to keep them informed, Clara and Silas sat in heavy silence. "2 fronts now," Silas said finally. "Legal and violent. We knew it would come to this." Clara tried to sound braver than she felt. "I won't let them take you." His hand found hers, gripped tight. "Either through law or force. I won't let them." "I know." She brought his hand to her lips. But Silas, I've been thinking about the legal side. What if I wrote to some of the women in Liberty? The wives who might have suspected what Edgar was doing, who might have kept their daughters away from his store. Would they speak up? Maybe. If they knew it might protect other women. If they knew they weren't alone in their suspicions. It's worth trying. He pulled her close. You're brilliant. You know that. I'm desperate, she corrected. There's a difference. No, you're brilliant and brave, and I don't deserve you. Stop that. She kissed him firmly. We deserve each other. We deserve happiness. We deserve this life we're building, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take it away. That afternoon, while Silas napped, his strength returning but slowly, Clara sat at the kitchen table with paper and pen. The letters were hard to write, each one a careful balance of truth and plea. She wrote to women she'd barely known, wives who'd given her sympathetic looks but never spoken of their suspicions. She wrote of her own innocence, her ignorance, her fear. She wrote of second chances and the child growing inside her. She wrote until her hand cramped and tears blurred the words. Jack posted the letters the next day, riding to 3 different towns to send them. Harder to intercept that way. He explained. Now all they could do was wait. Wait for replies that might never come. Wait for Silas to regain his strength. Wait for Morrison to make his move, either in court or with violence. But as Clara stood on the porch that evening, watching the sun set over their land, she felt oddly calm. Whatever came, they would face it, together, as a family. For that's what they were now, she realized. Not just husband and wife, but a family, with their child growing safe beneath her heart, and loyal friends like Jack ready to stand with them. Morrison thought he was hunting weak prey. He was about to learn what happened when you cornered a wolf's mate. Wolves. Clara had learned from Silas's stories. Mated for life. They protected their pack with savage loyalty. And if you threatened their young, she placed a hand over her belly, feeling that flutter of movement again. Don't worry, little one, she murmured. Your papa's a wolf, and your mama's learning to be one too. We'll keep you safe. Inside, she heard Silas stirring, calling her name. She went to him, leaving the dying light behind. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. Tonight, she would lie beside her husband, feel their child move within her, and know that whatever battles lay ahead, they had already won the most important one. They had chosen each other. They had chosen love over fear, hope over despair. And that, more than any legal document or loaded rifle, would see them through. Spring arrived in full glory, painting the prairie with wildflowers that stretched to the horizon. Clara stood in the doorway of their expanded house, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching Silas work with a new colt in the corral. He moved with his old grace again, the fever now just a memory, though she still woke sometimes to check his breathing. Letter came, Jack called out, riding in from town. He'd become indispensable these past months, as true a friend as they could have hoped for. Clara's heart jumped. The responses to her letters had been trickling in, some helpful, others cautious, a few hostile. But this envelope bore official seals. It's from Judge Patterson, she said, scanning quickly. The hearing in Cheyenne. Morrison's lawyer withdrew the petition. What? Silas vaulted the corral fence, reaching her in quick strides. Why would they do that? Clara kept reading, then laughed, actually laughed. 3 women from Liberty came forward with sworn statements about Edgar's activities. One of them kept a diary, names, dates, everything. Morrison's lawyer apparently decided his client wouldn't benefit from such information becoming public record. Silas pulled her carefully against him, mindful of her condition. You did it, you brilliant, brave woman. We did it, she corrected. All of us who refused to stay silent. But even as they celebrated this victory, they knew it wasn't over. Morrison himself hadn't been seen in weeks. The legal threat might be gone, but the physical one remained. It came 3 nights later. Clara woke to Bella's warning bark, followed by the thunder of hooves, many hooves. She shook Silas awake, but he was already moving, reaching for his rifle. How many? She whispered. 6, maybe 7. He was pulling on boots, checking ammunition. Stay inside. Bar the door behind me. Like hell! She was already reaching for the shotgun they kept loaded by the bed. Clara, the baby! The baby needs both parents alive. She stood firm despite her ungainly shape. We do this together or not at all. He looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded sharply. Kitchen window. Better angle, more cover. Jack will come from the barn. They moved through the dark house with practiced ease. Outside, men were dismounting, no longer trying for stealth. Boone, Morrison's voice carried clearly. Send her out and this ends peacefully. You can find another woman. Can't find another life. Silas's answer was a shot that sent Morrison diving for cover. Then everything erupted. Glass shattered as bullets flew. Clara fired the shotgun, pumped, fired again. The kick brutal against her shoulder. She saw a man fall, another scrambling back. Jack's rifle cracked from the barn, catching them in crossfire. But there were too many. A man made it to the porch, kicking at the door. Silas turned to meet the threat, leaving the window exposed. Clara saw Morrison rising, aiming at Silas's back. Time slowed. She moved without thinking, stepping into the line of fire just as Morrison squeezed the trigger. The impact spun her around, hot pain blooming in her shoulder. She heard Silas roar, saw him put 2 bullets in Morrison before the man could fire again. Then she was on the floor, Silas's hands pressing against the wound, his face terrible above her. Why? He was saying. Why did you? Because I love you, she gasped. Because our baby needs you. The rest was chaos. Jack and Silas finishing the fight. The survivors fleeing into the night. Then gentle hands lifting her. Silas's voice promising everything would be fine, though she could hear the fear beneath the words. The doctor, summoned by Jack's wild ride, worked through the dawn. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing anything vital, though blood loss was severe. But Clara was a fighter, and she had reasons to fight. She woke to find Silas beside her, haggard but whole. The baby? She asked immediately. Strong as his mama, Silas assured her. Still kicking up a storm. His or hers, either way, stubborn as both parents combined. His voice broke. You almost died. You stepped into a bullet meant for me, and I'd do it again. She gripped his hand weakly. That's what love does. Silas, it makes us strong enough to do impossible things. Morrison? Dead. His men scattered. Sheriff took our statements, said it was clear self-defense. He studied her face. It's over, Clara, really over. We're free. Free. The word settled over her like a blessing. Clara recovered as spring turned to summer. Her shoulder healed, leaving a scar to match some of Silas's. The garden flourished, the ranch prospered, and her belly grew round and tight. When the pain started on a September afternoon, Silas nearly panicked, but Clara, who had faced down guns and lawyers and ghosts from the past, met this challenge too with courage. Their son arrived with the sunset, red-faced, loud, and perfect. They named him James, after Silas's father, with Thomas for Clara's lost brother. He's beautiful, Silas whispered, holding his son with hands that shook. I never thought, never dreamed. I know, Clara said softly, watching the 2 men she loved most in the world. But some dreams are worth the wait. That evening, as Clara dozed with the baby at her breast and Silas kept watch like a guardian wolf, Jack brought unexpected news. Judge Patterson stopped by, said to tell you the territory's approved funding for a school in Willow Creek. They're looking for a teacher. He grinned at Clara. Man mentioned you taught some of the local kids their letters while recovering. Thought you might be interested. A teacher. It was something she'd never dared dream. But now, she looked at Silas, saw the pride in his eyes. After James is older, she said. Maybe. Definitely, Silas corrected. This town needs someone like you. Someone who knows that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. As night settled over the ranch, Clara held her son and leaned against her husband, listening to the familiar sounds of home, the wind through the grass, horses nickering in the corral, Bella settling on the porch with a contented sigh. They'd built this from ashes and fear, from loneliness and violence, from two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. It hadn't been easy, might never be easy, but it was theirs. "What are you thinking?" Silas asked softly. "That if someone had told me a year ago I'd be here, like this, I'd have thought them mad." She smiled up at him. "But here we are, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. Mrs. Boone, mother, future teacher, and the bravest woman in Wyoming territory. "Just a woman who learned to stop running," she corrected. "Who found something worth fighting for." "Found someone worth fighting for," he amended. "That too." James stirred, making the soft sounds that would soon turn to demands for milk. Clara adjusted him, marveling at the miracle of this new life they'd created. Not from fear or force or obligation, but from love, real love, the kind that faced down bullets and fevers and legal challenges without flinching. Outside, stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, raising a child, building a community, creating the life they'd fought so hard to claim. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. Clara May Henderson had become Clara Boone not through purchase or contract, but through choice, and that choice, renewed every day in 1,000 small ways, had transformed them both. The broken wife and the blood-stained husband had become something new. Partners, parents, people who'd learned that love wasn't just a feeling but an action, a daily decision to stand together against whatever came. In the distance, a wolf howled, not in sorrow, but in celebration. Calling to its mate across the miles, Silas smiled, pulled his family closer, and answered with a whistle that echoed across their land. They were home, they were whole, they were free, and their story, like the prairie itself, stretched endlessly forward into hope. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. If you're enjoying these tales of courage and romance from the American frontier, please comment below and let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to connect with fellow Western romance enthusiasts around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more heartwarming stories of love conquering all on the untamed frontier. Share your thoughts about Clara and Silas's journey in the comments. Which moment touched your heart the most?